Welcome back to another episode of the Three Seasons Podcast. I'm your host, Tyson Nagasaka, and here we talk about the three seasons of your wealth: accumulation, protection, and succession. On today's episode, we have Joseph Galli of the Loeys-Deitz Syndrome Foundation of Canada. We're going to talk about all of the work that they're doing behind the scenes, connecting the dots, research, data, as well as some major charitable giving options for the financial planning clients that we have. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Today, we have a special guest out of Montreal, and met this gentleman this year, and we've had some excellent conversations. I'm really pumped about what he's doing. And so we are very lucky to have Joseph Galli on the podcast today. Joseph, good morning or good afternoon
Good
for you.
morning. Yeah, it is afternoon. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you very much for having us, and I've enjoyed all of our interactions so far. Been great, very stimulating.
Yeah, excellent. I love everything that you're doing. So we were introduced through a friend of mine in the industry, and you did some presentations for them. My friend reached out and said, "Hey, listen, you got to talk to this guy Joseph. He's really interesting." And we connected, and it's like, holy crap! Like I didn't even know this was a thing, and we've had some really cool conversations. I can't wait to kind of dig into that. Um, Before we dig into the special purpose of the podcast today, you also run a separate company and have a freestanding other like business in place. So Joseph, what do you do on this as your side hustle for your main
Well,
job?
maybe I'll start. Yeah, I might. Well, so I've got a couple of day jobs. So I started off 40 years ago doing merchant banking, so M&A turnaround investments. So did that for about 30 odd years. So that's my area of expertise that I understand, and across multiple different industries, but a lot in the VC private equity space. That was really where I focused a lot of time and effort. That gave me a very broad canvas to learn from, and I like to learn. So that's kind of my background where I come from. I started off, excuse me, the way all of this started was December 24th, Christmas Eve 2009. Two of my three boys were diagnosed with a rare genetic disease, and they were 15 and 13 at the time, and life expectancy was 27. So if anybody has a kid out there, that's a gut punch, like beyond gut punch. And I decided that day to retire from my merchant banking background, and my objective was to keep him alive as long as possible. So we spent 6 months going back and forth to the Cleveland Clinic. We were fortunate enough to have the financial means to do that. And I quickly realized that that was not a methodology that was sustainable. If you have children that are teenagers, you can't take them out of school one day, 1 week on two. And as a teenager, all they want to be is normal, first
Yeah.
of all, right? That's all they want to be. So we started this foundation in the fall of 2010 with two other families. So Fertino and Topper, fantastic group. And the first thing we did, because the disease was not well known, is I went down to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, and I asked them to help build a diagnostic algorithm. Now, I'm an idiot, so I'm self-proclaimed idiot, but I know how to put people together. And we sat down with the people at Hopkins, and they came up with a algorithm to diagnose the disease. And why that's important is because we had all of these kids that were being misdiagnosed or not diagnosed at all and then dying because they weren't being treated. So the first thing I had to do was get that piece, a tool, a diagnostic tool. The second piece was I asked them to build me a very technical PowerPoint presentation. Excuse me. And I can sell and I can pitch. So I did 1,200 medical presentations over 4.5 years.
Wow.
And that was targeting, yeah, so it was targeting geneticists, pediatric cardiologists, and adult cardiologists, and pediatric orthopedic spine surgeons. And so anybody that would listen to me, I'd go and pitch, quite frankly.
Yep.
So that was the approach. And then I didn't know how to find these people. So I said, well, let's use the Pareto principle and say, where do they hang out? And essentially they hang out, everybody has a trade show or an industry conference every year. So I called up all the industry conferences, and I went to 17 industry conferences, and I took booths at the conference on the trade show floor.
Yeah.
So at the cardiac conference, this guy over here was selling heart bypass pumps, and this guy was selling stents. And I'm the guy in the middle selling a disease. And they said, we don't even know where to put you. We don't even know what to do with you, because nobody's ever told us that they wanted to come and educate about a disease. So that's what we did. And that allowed me to recruit really on the floor the best surgeons and doctors in the world, which created a network. We had a surefire, you'll appreciate this, we had a surefire methodology for finding what we call champions. And we would, somebody would be passing by and say, Dr. Nasaga, are you familiar with this disease? So we have an elevator pitch, brought him into the booth, wanted to capture his or her email, because if I had the email, then I could market to them, I could
Yep.
educate them. And then I'd say, look, we're looking for champions, and we have this surefire way to identify champions. They said, what is it? I said, you're either a champion or you're a shithead. And the people that were offended literally walked out, literally did a U-turn and walked out, and they self-selected out.
Yeah.
And the ones that stayed and laughed were the ones that have today become our champions, because they said, boy, you really get it. I was looking for people that are the smartest people in the world, but humble enough, Tyson, that they would be ready to learn about something new that they may not know, and learn from somebody who's an idiot like me that could helpfully impart upon them some of the information they need to do a better job. And so that's how we built our network of experts, and we call champions. And then that led us to doing the same way you would do a financial gap analysis for a client, right? You do an estate plan, you do a financial analysis. We do something called a gap analysis around the medical team. So if you have a child or an adult and you're either referred to us, either you find us on the internet or you're referred to us by a surgeon or a geneticist or a doctor, we'll spend 2 hours going through your family member's case. And we go through every single body system and then say, okay, there's this, is this presenting? Is this happening? Is this happening? And what we're trying to do is we're trying to help them to identify what the global picture looks like, because the healthcare system is siloed. The
Yeah.
cardiologist doesn't talk to who doesn't talk to who doesn't talk to. No different than in business. In your business,
Yeah.
the financial planner doesn't talk to the tax person, doesn't talk to the lawyer, doesn't talk to the insurance person, right? Exact same dilemma, just change the hats around the table.
That's right.
So we said, so essentially what we do is we call it a concierge service, and we're one of the few that do this in Canada. And essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to help the family to get a holistic view of the patient. I'll take a step back and talk about the disease for a second. It's called Loeys-Deitz Syndrome. And it's a connective tissue disease, which is an umbrella or a family of diseases. And it's collagen based. So women know collagen for this, and this. But collagen is also the thing that holds together every cell at the cellular matrix level of your body. Okay,
Yep.
so that's what the glue, think of it as the glue. So the challenge that you have is that if you have a problem with the collagen, there's a problem with the glue. What kills our patients is aortic root dissection. So the aorta is the largest artery to your heart. If that were to dissect now, the chances of you making it to a hospital will be very small. And then you could have something called aneurysms anywhere in the arterial structure. So if that pops, same type of situation. So that's what kills our patients, but every body system is affected and affected differently. So your head, your eyes, your chest, your back, your digestive, your allergy, female reproductive, inflammatory, et cetera, et cetera. And to give you an idea, my two boys have the exact same gene and don't have the same presentation. So the
Yeah.
challenge you have, and that's why we built the algorithm at the beginning, was if you're a doctor, you're trained, I'm going to make up a stupid example. Everybody with blue eyes and blonde hair is Swedish, okay? But you're trained to do pattern recognition. So you're looking for a pattern. So I've got 3 kids, let's look for the pattern, and they all look the same or they have the similar symptomology. In our case, because of the variability of presentation of the disease, that doesn't happen. Okay.
Yeah.
So what you end up with now is you miss all of these diagnoses because you've been trained a certain way. And we're saying to you, no, there's another way to do this. And that's why we built the diagnostic algorithm. So the concierge service allows us to help those families get a holistic view of the patient, whoever their patient is in the family. And then that led us to building relationships with multidisciplinary clinics across the country. And the reason for that was, again, because the one doesn't talk to another in terms of the discipline, we needed to have somewhere where I could send you with your child, for example, where they wouldn't kill your child through lack of knowledge, lack
Yeah.
of desire, but just lack of knowledge. And so in this case, what we were looking for is, okay, if we could form partnerships with these teams across the country, then when you call me up, I have a place to refer you to. Okay. Because most probably you've been fighting with this for years and don't know, your doctors don't know what to do, and they keep bouncing you around like a ping pong ball, right?
Right.
Not because they don't care, it's quite the opposite. They just don't know what to do.
Right.
So that led us to building these multidisciplinary partnerships across the country. So we have them from coast to coast, adult and pediatric. The next piece we wanted to do is we wanted to foster research. And if you look at the research model in the world today, called North America, it's really a publish or perish model. And what I mean by that is, first of all, 10% of medical research gets funded. And it goes to guys with this color hair. Okay?
Right.
90% of it goes to guys with my color hair. If I have an economic disincentive to take risk, let me explain. because I need to get that next publication. That next publication will lead me to my next grant.
Yeah.
So consequently, if I'm going to try something way out here in left field and it may not work, it's not my economic incentive or alignment for me to do that because I won't be able to get my next grant. And this is a world of grants. You got to go and you're constantly trying to fund your lab, what we call the labs. So we said, okay, question then becomes who does not have a disincentive? And it came down to young kids in their 30, 35 years old that are essentially have no brand. They have no real major orientation, but they're smart. Like these
Yeah.
are Ferraris that don't know they're Ferraris.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what it is. So 6, 7 years ago, we did something. Our sister foundation in the U.S. Did this with Dr. Pam Guerrero, who is at Johns Hopkins. So she's working at Hopkins, tier one institution. She's working for the guy, Dr. Deitz, that discovered the disease, and she's looking for $15,000, and nobody would give it to her because her thesis or hypothesis was way, way out in a field.
Yeah.
So our sister foundation in the US gave her the 15,000. She proved out her hypothesis and she ended up getting $1,046,000 of hard dollars from a whole series of other foundations because her work was very promising. But what became really interesting was she went on to get a permanent lab at the NIH. So the NIH, if you would think about it, is the equivalent. If you think about NHL and you think about the hockey team and you think about the All-Star game of the hockey team of the NHL,
Yeah.
the NIH is the first line of the NHL All-Star team. That's who works there. So she ended up getting a full-time lab at the NIH. So in finance terms, if you're a finance person, which we both are, and you say, okay, is that a good return? 15,000 gets you $1,046,000, and that gets you a permanent lab at the NIH. So if you bought Google for 10 cents and sold Google for $1,000, would that be a good ROI? You should be like, yeah, for sure, right? It's that on steroids when you go to the NIH. She now has a permanent lab that is referred to around the world.
Right.
So we said to ourselves, okay, I'm an old venture capital guy. And I said, if you think about venture capital is a binary return scenario. Hit the ball, don't hit the ball, right? You invest in 10, 9 are going to go belly up. One hopefully hits the ball and pays for the 10. That's the model.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So if you think about it, medical research is no different. You're going to do 10, you're going to fund 10 people. 9 of them are going to go nowhere and one of them is going to hit the ball. The question, of course, like in venture capital, is which one? The answer is don't know. So you have to spread it around, right?
Yeah.
So we said, okay, what happens if we took a VC approach to our thinking around medical research and funding these young kids? So what we did is we said, we'll give them $25,000 US seed money. So the same way if if somebody came to you, a family member, and said, I have this idea for a new app and I need 10 grand, and you're never going to get the money back. We call it love money, right?
Yeah.
So you give them 10 grand because you want to support them. So we said, we're going to give them 25 grand US as seed money. We're going to give them an opportunity to plug into our network. So you have to remember that in this world, there's surgeons, there's God, and there's doctors. Okay. These kids are way down here. You can't even see how far down they are on the pecking order. It's a caste hierarchical system.
Yeah.
So a young kid calls up, a senior gal or guy, and they're gonna return the call. They just flush. But if I call a senior person who's in our network and I say, hey, Tyson, I'd really like you to speak to Mary, would you take the time? You'll take the call, right?
Yeah.
So access to the network now is critical because if I can pair these young kids to these people over here, that's where the real magic happens. The third part was a fluke. I'll be honest with you. We were playing with the idea and we said, in business, we hire executive coaches. We do that all the time, right? For your staff and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I said, what happens if we hired executive coaches for these kids? And people said, we don't do that in the healthcare industry, in the research. I said, well, it doesn't matter. I'm an idiot. So I can try anything because, I'm not stuck by whatever the boundaries are of the industry because I don't come from the industry. So I can try something different. So we hired these executive coaches and we gave them to these kids. And I'd like you to think about these kids as being Ferraris that don't know they're Ferraris.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd like you to think about if you've ever driven a high performance car and you step on the accelerator, you can kill yourself because you can end up, into a wall or something else. So we call that driving the track, learning how to drive the track. So I said, these coaches, their job is 1, to make the kid realize they're a Ferrari, and 2, to make the kid learn how to drive the track without killing themselves.
Yeah.
So you take these kids that are like this and you do this. And when you do that, the return on investment is exponential because it's not just in our space. They start to look at the world as a different canvas, right? and they start to look at opportunity. The healthcare system and the research is a world of scarcity, not
Mm.
a world of abundance,
Yeah.
okay, and opportunity. The first thing everybody starts with is no budget, no budget, no budget. There's no money, and we teach them to say blank check, put aside that discussion, come back now with the hypothesis and the business plan.
Right.
If you had unlimited money, Tyson, what would you do? That's what we ask them to do.
Yeah.
So that's our philosophy on the young kids. And those are our, if you come back to the hockey analogy, those are our farm club, right? We're basically building out the next generation of NHLers, but in this case, stars for our medical world. That led us to building actually biannual conference. It's called HAD. It takes place every 2 years. The next one is in Vancouver next fall, 2025. And we bring in for a day the top researchers in the world, and they do a continuing education day amongst themselves. That evening, we host a dinner with lots of alcohol because these people are fantastic people, but they have no networking or collaboration idea whatsoever. So we put them together and start to make that happen. And then the second day, we bring in patients with the researchers and the surgeons and the doctors. And there's a collaborative day, which for both parties is a tremendous aha moment because you take stuff that's theoretical for the surgeons and doctors and you bring the patient face to face who comes in with their file literally under their arm like this and says, Dr. Tyson, I'd like to tell you about this and can you help me with that? And it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So we do that every 2 years, and that's a huge success, that event. And then one of the things that we started to realize was if a researcher wants to do research, so think of a car and gasoline. Okay, researchers are cars, gasoline is data.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the analogy. So you're a young researcher, you come to us and say, I've got this great idea. I want to do research. We pass you through ethics and all of the stuff and steps that you have to go through. And then you say to me, well, can I have the data? I say, well, I don't have any data. And you get this chicken and egg thing that goes round and round. So we're now in the gasoline business. That's essentially what it is. So May 31st of this year, we hosted 90% of all the pediatric cardiologists in the country in Montreal. They signed on to a network that we've formed with a partnership out of the University of Sherbrooke, where essentially we're building what's called a registry. And a registry is a fancy term for a database. So with parental permission now, we'll take all the history of a child and put it into this database. And then every time the child comes in, we'll put all of their subsequent appointments in. And so you end up with a longitudinal data set. So you now have an ability to look at the history of that child over time and how the disease has progressed. We're going to bolt onto that a biobank. So a biobank is blood, serum, and tissue, right? And then we're going to bolt onto that an imaging bank, which is going to be echo, CT, and MR. Now, why do we want to do that? If you're a researcher and you need data, I'll have the data. If you're an imaging guy, I'll have the imaging piece for you. And if you're a lab rat, it's not a derogatory term, but the guys who love to play in the lab and with chemicals and sequencing and all that type of stuff, we'll have that piece where we can give them live samples. Now, think about having those three major data sets and I overlay machine learning on top of them.
Right.
And I now start to realize, everybody that has an image that looks like this with a data set that looks like that and has a sequencing that looks like this ends up with this type of result. That allows you now to do a diagnostic piece that you were not able to do normally.
That's right.
So that's called a registry. We're funding that entire cost of it, but really, it brings me to our next point. We actually have three currencies. So when people think about it, and this is how we look at this differently than other people. One currency for us is essentially dollars, like everybody else, standard. The second currency for us is the network and the people that we can bring to the table. And in particular, the HR resources. So you as a business person and myself as a business person, we may not have the answer, but we know how to get the answer. We know how to bring people together and we know how to bring collaboration to a point where you can get a result.
Yeah.
In this world, these are the smartest people here. Over here and over here, not so smart. And they're the first to admit it. And listen, I want my cardiac surgeon to have the best skill set in the world here, right? Don't you? If your child or you were to go, you want them to be the best right here. Over here and over here, I can find other resources. So our job is to bring the resources to the table. So we bring a whole series of team members that help those doctors, surgeons, and specialists to work through wherever we want to get to, for example, on this registry. And then the third currency we have, which is an interesting one, is relevancy. So coming back to the publisher perish model, if you're going to put in a grant application, Tyson, for doing a certain type of research, the grant organization that's reviewing your application is going to ask you, what's the relevancy to this patient population? I think it's this, it may be that.
Right.
If you partner with us, we'll be able to tell, one will help you to refine your application to be super relevant, which then increases your score. And it becomes a little bit, a self-fulfilling prophecy because now you do research that hits the ball. There's a higher probability of hitting the ball, right?
Yep.
That's what it comes down to. So that's how we run. We don't do golf tournaments. We don't do walks. We don't do galas. They're all fantastic marketing initiatives. I think they're terrible ROI. You
Right.
spend 10 months organizing a gala, and tonight there's a snowstorm in Montreal, and half the people don't show up,
Yep.
right? Which we've seen happen, those types of things. So that's the typical model. There's 85,000 charities in Canada, 20,000 on the verge of bankruptcy at any point in time.
Yeah.
They don't have balance sheets. So think about, we talk about a client who lives paycheck to paycheck. Well, these charities live event to event, right?
Yeah.
That's really what they're doing.
Yeah.
So the question then became, how do we develop a model that would allow us to have an endowment so that we have sustainability and longevity? Okay. And so our objective is to build a $500 million endowment. Now, there's only one way to do that. And let me go back for a second. Why 500? Because if you earn over time what we call a pension 7% return, around 500 million, that's $35 million a year. Now, we figured out a way to lever that 4-to-1. So you put in 35, but you're actually funding 140 million of research. You now become one of the major funders of medical research on the private side in Canada at
Yeah.
that point. And you can drive stuff because, there's the goal, remember the golden rule, as the goal makes the rule,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
And that's really what it comes down to in business as in everything else in life. So that's the model. And that's how I got to where we are. And that's how you and I met, was around this model with respect to life insurance donations. And really was to say, could we find a way to take lapsing life insurance policies that people no longer need, that are going in the garbage? Could we find a way to help, direct those policies into medical research? And that's the model that we have essentially built. So I'll stop there. I don't know if you have any questions or clarifications on the first half of what we did. Allow me to drink some water.
Yeah. Yeah. Please have a drink, take a breath. I think that's awesome. One of the things is like in the last year and a half, 2 years, I've become more and more involved in philanthropic planning with clients and touching base with different foundations, communities, hospitals, and things. And I think a lot of what you're saying really shows through is that the people who are running a lot of the charities, especially the smaller ones, they're sweethearts and they're doing it because they love it, but they don't have a VC background. They don't have a finance background. And they love the community and the involvement and the end result, but they don't know how to like run an organization, raise capital, really tug on the heartstrings of donors. And, I think that's where you've crossed over and you kind of have a foothold in each place is you have a deep-rooted need to solve this issue, and you have a background that says, "Hey, here's how we finance the campaign against this issue." So I think
Yeah,
that's amazing, and that's why it's so
thank you.
unique because not everybody comes from that world.
I tell people that I spent 30 odd years practicing for this gig.
Yeah, right.
That's what I tell everybody, because at the end of the day, I look at everything that I did before and how it's added to what I'm doing. And it's really the breadth of experience and exposure and network and trying different things has allowed me to try things here and build things that have not been necessarily tried before. So maybe just to understand my mindset, I look at the world in terms of Lego blocks. So everything is assembled together, and then the question I ask is, how do I disassemble it down to the smallest chunk of Lego? Okay, that's how I look at everything. So the question then became, if life insurance donations of policies that are unwanted, that are no longer required, can we monetize those? And so the first thing we looked at is we looked at the CRA, and there's something called the 3-10 rule, 3-year, 10-year rule at CRA, which has been enforced for many, many years. And it basically says that if you have a term policy, so a term policy has no cash in it, and it's for a fixed period of time. If you have a term policy and and it's more than 3 years and 1 day in force, but was not intended for donation purposes. So estate planning, mortgage, it could have been buy-sell agreement in a partnership. It could have been a liability for whatever it happens to be. So it was not for philanthropy or donation purposes. Okay.
Yeah.
You can donate that policy to any charity you want, and they can issue a tax receipt for the fair market value of a permanent policy. Basically, that's what it comes down to. So if you look at that and you think about, we did a case actually in Calgary. So 68-year-old gentleman, T10, so term 10 policy. 10 years ago at 58, he was standard. Today he's uninsurable, so he's got a reduced life expectancy. Okay, it's a net present value calculation at the end of the day. If you think about it, that's all it is.
Right.
So yeah, shortened life expectancy. He sold his business for a lot of money, and he said, you know what? I don't need the policy. Dump it. So we found out about it through one of our partners. We did the medical underwriting and actuarial underwriting, and he donated the term policy to the foundation. We become the owner, the beneficiary, and the payor because a life insurance policy is a legal asset. So he donates a legal asset. We have medical underwriting, and the actuary put a value on that, and we issue a tax receipt for $2.4 million.
Wow.
So here's a policy that's going in the garbage, quite literally. The client doesn't need, and now we were able to provide him with a tax receipt for 2.4. Let's say he's at 50%, just round numbers. He's able to put 1.2 million in his pocket. So he has an asset that he didn't know he had as an asset. He's been able to monetize the asset, and now we've created also, if the advisor is doing wealth management, you created 1.2 million of new AUM that the advisor didn't have before, right?
Absolutely.
Access to. We then become the owner, payor, and beneficiary, and then we convert the policy from term to perm. So the conversion from term to perm, the advisor keeps all the compensation on that. We pay the premiums. When that client, that donor passes away, the money comes into the foundation for medical research and patient support. So that's the model that we started with Feb 1, 2019, so almost 6 years ago. We've seen 630, 40, 50 deals or cases. We've done about 120, so 125. Our portfolio is 125 policies with $76 million of death benefit in it.
Wow.
I would happen to say it's probably the largest of any of the charities in Canada in terms of breadth and policy construction. We then figured out how to do partial term. So you have a client that has a term policy, they convert part of it and they donate the balance. So we just did one, ironically, in Calgary again. Wonderful lady, shortened life expectancy, no income, going through a divorce, and she donated 1,150,000. So she had a 1,250, 1,250,000. She converted 100,000, and she donated 1,150. So the 1,150, she ended up with a tax receipt for $567,000.
Wow.
But she has no income. So how do you use it? She has an RSP. She melted down the RSP right in one shot.
Yeah.
So it's great for a meltdown of, the tax receipt is good for a RSP meltdown, for a RIF. We've had some clients who are older in their 70s that have done the same thing with the RIF. So that was the second part. The third part we figured out how to do was how to monetize term riders. Term riders are going to be a capacity to add additional coverage without medical underwriting on a current perm product. Very heavily used in the IFA market as a way to increase MTAR capacity, have a larger ADO. So we figured out how to do that. And then this past year, the last area we focused on was CSV and how to monetize permanent policies with cash surrender value.
Okay.
And that's worked out very, very well. We can typically give a client anywhere up to, in some cases, twice the amount of CSV net.
Wow.
Through the tax receipt as opposed to surrender. So surrender the policy, get $1, donate the policy, end up with $2. We end up with the policy from a medical standpoint or from a medical funding standpoint is fantastic. So those are the use cases that we basically work with advisors. We do not contact anybody and suggest that they give up their policy. The client has made a decision that they no longer need it. That's the trigger. At that moment, then hopefully an advisor has heard about us and it gives us a call, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're looking for.
That's right.
But we don't do any advertising to the community, to the public. We're not encouraging people to get rid of their policies, but they've made that decision, don't need it anymore, and getting rid of it. That's for us the trigger. So that's, we've passed all the hurdles from a regulatory standpoint at all the markets. So that's not an issue. It is not a life settlement, which is what people refer to as life settlements and viaticals, which is the sale and purchase of a policy. We don't pay anything for a policy. It is a donation, clean and simple. And we do not trade or sell the policies afterwards. They stay on the books. And our objective, if you're an advisor and somebody wants to cancel a policy, the typical, dialogue or conversation that goes back and forth is, I call you up and I say, Tyson, I'd like to cancel my policy. you're going to say to me, Joe, is there somebody in the family that can take it over because it's a great ROI? And in 99.9% of the cases, the answer is no,
Yeah.
right? There's nobody that can take it over. So now the advisor can say, have you considered donating to medical research? And the person goes, I didn't know I could do that. Well, we have this partnership with a foundation, and they fund medical research in 7 different areas. And they only do 1 in 5. So we set the expectations up front. So we're not going to do every single case.
Right.
They only do 1 in 5. But if it works, you're going to fund medical research in cancer, cardiac, pediatric spine, pregnancy, GI, allergy, and inflammation. That touches everybody. I've never had a donor say, I'm not donating to you guys because, it's not my disease or it's not related to what I'm, passionate about.
Yeah.
So it's worked out very, very well in that regard. We've issued now close to 40 million of tax receipts. So, if you
Wow.
think about it, that's about 20 million bucks in seniors' pockets that we're going to the garbage.
Yeah.
That's 20 million of cash, right? That's been injected back in their pockets.
Yeah. That's
So
huge.
it is huge. It is huge. And in Canada, we don't think of life insurance as an asset unless it has cash in it. But if you
Absolutely.
think about a term policy, it's the net present value of future payout. Really, that's what the value of that policy is, simplistically put.
Yeah.
So that's the model. That's how we do it. The reason why we do it is because I want to keep my kids alive as long as possible with the best quality of life.
Yeah.
I want to help a whole bunch of other people's kids and adults to do the same thing. And we couldn't do it without people like yourself that have been super supportive and the community. They've been really wonderful, and we love to work with you guys. It's good for the donor. It's good for the advisor. It's good for the carrier. It's good for the MGA, and it's good for medical research.
Yeah, it
So
absolutely is.
it's a win all around. So that's what we do. That's how we do it.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, thank you so much for doing it and for fighting the battle. I mean, just imagine, well, and when we've talked offline, is there's all these experts and they're great at what they do, but there's been nobody who wants to go through the pain of coordinating and translating effectively, saying, "Hey, you guys look at this, and you guys look at this, and you guys only fund this, but why don't we bring it all together, right?" And that's like a 1 + 1 = 3 type of scenario. And man, I wish it would happen more, but it takes somebody with the fortitude to kind of walk through, especially in the beginning. It must have been difficult to get people to stay on message and stay, or it's like organizing cats, right?
Herding cats. It still is a challenge because there's always going to be something new that pops up because you have to understand that we haven't done anything new. So this is going to sound weird.
That's right.
We've broken everything down to the smallest Lego blocks and we just reassembled them. So whether it's medical underwriting, whether it's actuarial, I'll give you an example. We have our own servicing team. So the back office of the carriers are often very difficult and disorganized. So we have a group that basically goes through every single policy every single month and reviews with the carrier to make sure 11 data points, including the beneficiary, the payor, and all of that is still enforced because we've had beneficiaries change that we didn't recommend, that we did not request.
Yeah.
We've had money go from our account into somebody else's account, just because of a typo when somebody was keen in data or whatever it happened to be. So, when you start this, you don't think about those things. Then you realize the state of the industry. You say, well, that reduces risk because I can't afford to have a beneficiary change and then find out in 5 or 10 years from now
Yeah.
that, that beneficiary's changed. And we've been paying the premiums all that time and we thought it was coming to us. Right.
Right.
And then the next piece we needed to do was to find out when somebody passes away and when they pass away, because we need to know so we can file our claim to be able to get the money in. So we weren't really satisfied with what was out there in Canada in terms of tracking of deaths in Canada. So we partnered with a pension fund and they lent us a lead programmer for 2.5 years. We paid his salary part-time as kind of a community outreach. It was a great opportunity. Still working with us, a super guy. And we built a team around it. And we now have 4.1 million deaths in our database. And we pick up 85% of the deaths every day in Canada.
Wow.
And why that's important is if somebody passes away, I need to know so I can file the claim and get the money in so I can keep the wheel going from a medical research. So
Absolutely.
it's never easy. There's always something new. It could be regulatory. It could be whatever. But we have a philosophy that this is a problem. This is an opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay. People stop at this. You have to do the little bit of extra exercise and say, okay, what's the opportunity in the situation? That's really the question. And so every time there is a problem, my team, my kids, everybody I know, they know better come back with what the opportunity is because there is an opportunity. It doesn't matter whether it's in our business, your business, raising a family, whatever you're doing, there's always an opportunity there. We just are not trained to look beyond the problem and we get hung up on the negativity
Yeah,
instead of saying, okay, how do I turn this into a positive?
that's right.
So, we have a very, a situation that's not great. It's been a tough number of years with the kids. They are super resilient. They're my stars. When I have a bad day, I look and I say, I'm not allowed to have a bad day. I'm not allowed to feel sorry for myself because every day for them is a challenging day. And so I look at them and all of our patients for inspiration and say, you know what? I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to, just dig in a little bit deeper
Yeah,
and do whatever I have to do. So and we've been surrounded by wonderful people, phenomenally bright people, very caring people. And one of the things I'll share with you on a personal note is that when you start to go through these types of situations, the bullshit meter goes off the scale pretty quickly. So
yeah,
there's no time for negativity in our life. And every day that we have and I have with my boys is a gift. And so I focus every day on making sure I'm grateful for that and that I can maximize that day and whatever time I can have with them. So what it does is it does a nice purification. All the negativity in life, it's a choice. You either allow the negativity to come in or you say, no, no, no negativity. Here's the wall, stay out.
yeah,
And so life is challenging but simple in that the recipe is simple. We just want to have good, positive people in whatever we're doing.
yeah,
And we want to be grateful for the opportunity to have every day that we have together. So
yeah.
that's what we do.
That's awesome. I actually think that that's a really good message. Um, Outside of all the other awesome stuff that you're doing, is I think a lot of people, especially young adults in this era, is they get so negative and depressed so easily because they don't have the mission like you have. You have a mission to accomplish and you're very dedicated to it. And I think if more people had something that was kind of their North Star or that they were really committed to, and
Right.
I think a lot of people under, 50 years old, they don't feel the commitment to something the way that the previous generation did, where it was like do or die. That's all you have. That's the only option you have.
It was survival.
Yeah.
If you think about it, it was survival. I'm be honest with you, since December 24th, 2009, I'm in survival mode 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
We've been through spinal surgery, we've been through cancer, we've been through double eye surgery, sudden cardiac arrest. I can go on and on and on in the past 10 years.
Yeah.
So every day that, we're always waiting for something to happen. And when it doesn't happen, you say, thank you. It's a great day. Appreciate the day. And every moment, my philosophy with this is every interaction I have has to be a positive interaction. If I leave this call with you today, I want to leave it on a positive note
Yeah.
because I don't know what tomorrow brings.
That's right.
Right. And I think to your point, the younger generations today, and we all have a gift. My gift is this little slice here. Your gift is here. Somebody else's gift is here. They just have to ask themselves what their gift is
Yeah.
and how can they make a difference. That's really the question at the end of the day is what can they do to make it? And I can guarantee you they can make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. That's isn't that awesome? What a positive message. I think that more and more people need to hear. I think it needs to be encouraged a little bit more, and I wish it was more of a thread in our society, um, to to look at the things the right way. Um, but I don't even know what else to ask you. You did such a great job of running through everything.
Thank
I
you.
love what you're doing. I think that, like you said, the arming of the professionals that are out there in the spaces is the data and not just the the WebMD or the medical textbooks that they have access to, but all of the other pieces. And like you said, having a bolt-on assembly to be able to bring in other areas of expertise so they can access more data that's relevant and sort it. And I think the sorting part is the hard part as we enter the data age where we have everything at our fingertips, sorting out
Yep.
stuff that's irrelevant and looking at what makes sense to what we're looking at is a huge piece. And so thank you for being one of the ones that does that, because who else is coordinating and organizing medical information?
Well, there's other people doing things in other diseases and doing great things. We're trying to touch our little disease state, but it does touch quite a few different medical areas, and we have great teams that work with and great medical professionals that we work with and healthcare professionals. We're very blessed to have really great people and they're very smart, but they all drive with their hearts.
Yeah.
And that's the key thing. I just quick story. I've had a doctor call me from Winnipeg, and he said, so and so doctor referred me to, and I said, and I take every call from anybody, anytime, whether it's doctor or patient, doesn't matter. And he said, I lose sleep over this child who's 4 years old. And he said he has Loeys-Deitz syndrome, which is our syndrome, and I don't know what to do with this. I said, okay, look, I'm not a doctor, but we have this approach to the methodology. So he went through that. And then I said, maybe I can plug you into some peers in the industry that'll help you to understand better what you might be able to do for him as this
Yeah.
child. And then he called me back a couple of months later and said, he said, thank you. He said, and essentially what happened was we can not only impact the patients, we can impact the medical professionals.
Yeah.
These, I feel a tremendous amount of empathy for them. If you think about when we were kids and used to play outside and used to, you'd be playing outside all day, you go to somebody's garden hose and drink water, right, from
Yeah.
the garden hose. Well, today they drink from a fire hydrant in terms of information.
Yeah.
So imagine putting your face in front of a fire hydrant and trying to drink water. That's what they do with information every single day.
Yeah.
That's the amount of new information coming at them. So their ability to pull it together is they're overloaded. They're in a constant state of overload.
Yeah.
So whenever we can work with them and help them to separate out, you said sorting, basically help them to figure out what's key so they can focus on that, either through access to data or access to other people that have access to data,
Yeah.
then that becomes a big value add. So we're just very blessed. We have a lot of really great people that we're working with and surrounded by. And I appreciate the opportunity today because we can get this message out to whoever listens. I
Absolutely.
will tell you this: we have some jackets that we wear that are branded with our foundation, and one of our business partners was wearing one in London, Ontario, at a grocery store. And a mother came up to her and said, "Excuse me, my son has this disease. Can you help me?" And it was like we were all blown away, but it just goes to show you, as we start to have more awareness around this disease, we're able to diagnose these kids earlier. If we can diagnose them, we can hopefully keep them alive longer, live
Yeah.
a better quality of life. So, you never know where it comes from. There might be somebody who listens to this podcast and reaches out to me and says, "Hey, Joe, can you help us with this?" And that's happened before. And of course, we're open. The other thing is I'll travel anywhere, anytime to talk to anybody
Yeah.
on my own coin. So happy to do that, whether it's a medical professional, whether it's a life insurance person, whether it's a financial advisor, or just somebody that needs some help.
Right. Absolutely. And we want to get that message out. I think this is one of those fires that we want to fuel, and we want to be able to help, especially when you hear those stories about, a young child that comes down with this, and then everybody's like, what do I do? I can't imagine. I mean, you talk to all of the medical professionals, is nobody goes to the doctor when they're feeling great and there's no problem. And so their whole day is they're solving problems, right? And so they have to have just an amazing attitude and outlook on life to be able to do it for 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, they do. And I get it. Listen, a lot of these people have become very good friends,
Yeah.
and they have rough days like you and I have. We think of them as being professionals and all that. They're human beings. They have problems with their kids, with their spouses, with their finances, with their car, with their boss. All the stuff that we have, they have as well. And so sometimes we just have to show a little empathy because they're trying really hard, and very often the system doesn't allow them to perform the way they would like to, in a manner that's consistent with their personal ethos.
Yeah.
So, it's just maybe another message is have some empathy for your medical providers because they work really hard and they care. They
Yeah.
really care.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for doing this today. Um,
Pleasure.
if somebody's listening to this and they want more information, how do they find you? How do they reach out to you?
Put my email in the description, I guess, of the podcast. Happy to speak to anybody. They can reach out to me by email. We'll set up a call
Yep.
and go from there. Absolutely no problem. Be a pleasure.
Yeah, fantastic. Joseph, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate the time, and I can't wait to see how we're going to help.
Look forward to it. And thanks a lot for the opportunity and thanks for taking the time. Have a great day.
All right, we'll talk to you later.
Cheers.